What's going on, guys, and welcome back to WWE Network and Chill, where I, Graham Jason Matthews, break down all the original content I watch on the WWE Network. Today we're talking the first season, episode 2 of WWE Ruthless Aggression, entitled Enter John Cena. In case you haven't already checked it out, please do so. The first episode was fucking awesome. I reviewed that yesterday here for the channel. That went up on Sunday. This episode went up yesterday, I think first thing Monday morning. And I think that's going to be the new norm for the show going forward. So there's plenty to talk about this coming weekend too, which is cool. The third episode of the show goes up next Monday, but before that on Sunday, which I just found out like literally hours ago, was at the new Broken Skull Sessions with The Big Show. And Stone Cold Steve Austin is going up on Sunday. So there's going to be a ton to talk about and review this coming weekend. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to WWE Network and Chill, where I, Graham Jason Matthews, break down all the original content I watch on the WWE Network. Today we're talking Season 1, Episode 2 of WWE Ruthless Aggression, or Ruthless Aggression. I did that impersonation in the first episode, which was absolutely terrible, and I apologize again. But speaking of which, I did review the first episode of the show yesterday that went up on Sunday. This episode, episode 2, entitled Enter John Cena, went up on Monday. So I think that's the new norm for the show going forward. The episodes will be uploaded to the network, I think first thing Monday morning, which is awesome, because that means I can watch them on Mondays and review them for like later on that day, which is cool if I have the time, so keep an eye out for that. But next week will be different. Next week will be the exception, because I think Sunday is the all-new episode of Broken Skull Sessions, which I didn't know about. I mean, I knew who the guest was, but I didn't know when it was going up, or at least I forgot anyway. I think this Sunday is when the new episode of Broken Skull Sessions goes up with The Big Show and Stone Cold Steve Austin, so that'll be cool. I think Big Show has done a podcast with Austin before on the network, but this is totally different. So I'm looking forward to that. That should be up on Sunday. My review should be up on Monday, because those are on the longer side. So I'll probably break that down here for Network and Chill on Monday, and then my review of the third episode of WWE Ruthless Aggression going up on Tuesday. So keep an eye out for all that stuff, in addition to my Ms. and Mrs. reviews and everything else that goes up here on the channel throughout the week. But nonetheless, and I think there's a new WWE documentary on R-Truth going up, maybe after Super Showdown, after on the 27th of February next week. And then I know there's a new Chronicle going up too at some point, I think with Shayna Baszler. So a lot to look forward to in the network in the next couple of weeks. And I'm sure there's going to be a new day of, hopefully on the Saudi Arabia Super Showdown show going up next week as well. Or not going up next week, but that pay-per-view's happening next week. I'm sure there's going to be a Dave on that soon after that event airs in a couple of weeks. So anyway, this episode was episode 2 of Season 1, WWE Ruthless Aggression. If you have yet to check out the pilot episode of the show, definitely do so. It was great. That one was about 40 minutes. This one was about 50 minutes. I had someone ask me on Twitter, at E13 Emmanuel, shout out to him. He asked me on Twitter on Monday a couple of questions about that first episode. So real quickly to clarify, I know I didn't discuss this on the episode, so just to clarify in WWE's, first episode of the show, what they covered, what they didn't. Yeah, they covered the change from WWF to WWE. They did not say anything about the lawsuit from the Panda Company, so just to make that clear, it wasn't something I excluded by accident. They definitely did not make any mention of that in the documentary. And I saw some people saying, the real reason why they changed the name. Well, no fucking shit. I think we all know why they changed the name from WWF to WWE. It wasn't a choice as they painted it out to be in that episode. It was because they had to, because they were getting sued by the pandas. Not the literal pandas, but you know what I'm saying, by the animal company, the World Wildlife Federation. So they made no mention of that in the episode. They kind of painted it as, it's a new era, let's call ourselves WWE. So that's a whole other documentary in and of itself. Second thing, what is the Ruthless Aggression era? How much of this era are they really covering here? Emmanuel was wondering. That first episode only went from like 2001, from when WCW closed in the Invasion angle, which they covered in depth to an extent. It ran up until 2002 for when John Cena debuted, and that's when this episode kicked off. So after watching this episode, I figured they would only cover Cena's rise. I thought they would only cover from like when he debuted in 2002 up until he won the WWE title in 2005. They actually went beyond that up until his WrestleMania 23 match with Shawn Michaels. So maybe, personally, if you were to ask me what would I define, which there's no set date or anything, this is all subjective, what would you define as the Ruthless Aggression era? Personally, I would say 02 to 05. I fucking hate the era shit. I think people kind of got out of hand with the Attitude Era thing. Like, I get that was a real era. This, I guess, was an era too. There's really no eras anymore. There's no PG era, the reality era. The rock and wrestling stuff, I think after maybe the Ruthless Aggression era, it all kind of blends together. And there's really no end date for when the Ruthless Aggression era ended anyway, like 08 maybe when they went PG, I don't know. But even then they were still doing edgy storylines. But nonetheless, what I was going to say was that in this episode it ran from Cena's debut and a little bit before that with Cena's OVW tenure up until 2007. So I don't know if that's the new norm for the show, like if they're going to cover from 02 to 07. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of episodes on this show. I'm not even really sure what the future episodes will cover. I'm sure they'll include, stories on Orton, Batista, Lesnar, some other stuff that was going on from 02 to 05. Eddie Guerrero, I'm sure, will be covered at some point, which is cool. But yeah, I'm sure like the Benoit stuff won't be covered, won't be mentioned, obviously. Even though he was a big part of that era, but again, I can understand why they wouldn't want to touch that. That's my assumption that I think anything up until 2007 might be game. I don't know if they'll cover the end of the Ruthless Aggression era and talk more about 08 and everything beyond that. I would love to see that just because that's when I started watching, but I'm not really sure if that's going to be covered. So anyway, to kind of kick it off here, we hear from John Cena, who says that his biggest takeaway from the Ruthless Aggression era, and this is a bit of a preview of what he talks about at the end of the episode, but his biggest takeaway from that era was that he was a failure. Not that the Ruthless Aggression era itself was a failure, but that he was a failure. Because he had this golden opportunity. Ruthless Aggression had this hot debut, but it was one of, if not the biggest miss in his entire WWE career. So that's where we start things off. And I've never heard Cena talk about his debut like this and how much of a failure it was. And maybe he has in other interviews, but he definitely doesn't talk about it enough. And he's right. I think a lot of people think that, that debut was such a success because he became such a big star. Yeah, he did, but the immediate aftermath of that moment was not successful. Cena did not take off overnight. Yeah, that debut was great. It was memorable. People look back on it today. But I feel like if other people had a similar debut, like, for example, Kevin Owens, like, not enough people talk about that 5 years later because he's not the star that John Cena is. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think people kind of remember that Cena debut so fondly because he became the big star that he was. If he got fired 6 months later, as was originally the plan per Cena and other people, then I don't think we would remember that debut as fondly as we do today. So anyway, we hear from JBL, who says that every era in WWE is defined by a top star. You go from like Hulk Hogan in the 80s, or Bruno Sammartino in the 60s and 70s, Bob Backlund in the 70s, and stuff like that. Stone Cold Steve Austin, and then there was nobody. The Rock left, Stone Cold Steve Austin left, which they talked about in the first episode of the show. So they needed someone at this point to transcend the business and go mainstream. That's really what everyone has done. Every top star, I'm not really sure if Bruno Sammartino was mainstream in movies and shit, but people outside of wrestling, I think for the most part, knew who Bruno Sammartino was. A lot of people knew who Bob Backlund was. My dad is not a wrestling fan, but he knew who Sammartino was. He knew who Bob Backlund was. Everyone knows who The Rock is. Everyone knows who Hulk Hogan is. Everyone knows who John Cena is. Not really sure that they have that today with Roman Reigns, but maybe close enough, I'm not sure. 2002, according to Raw writer, WWE writer Brian Gewirtz, who was all over this episode, all over the first one, which is great. He said that O2 needed something fresh, and that their first exposure, the writer's first exposure of John Cena, was actually an accident because they were looking at tapes of Rico. Yeah, the same Rico who came to the main roster with like a gay gimmick. I'm not even really sure if it was explicitly said that he had a gay character, but that was like the implication because he was like doing the whole Billy and Chuck thing. He was like a fashion designer. He went absolutely nowhere, but I mean, he was a star in OVW, which really amazes me. I don't really know too much about Rico. I mean, I know of his career on the main roster, but not prior to that. He was like one of the standouts from WWE's developmental territory at that point. They were eyeing Rico as like the next guy in WWE, but through tapes of watching Rico, they found out, they discovered John Cena. because Cena was teaming with Rico at the time. And Cena, to them, really stood out because he blew everyone away with his charisma, his talent, and he kind of showed up and did dark matches and stuff like that soon after. But while he was in OVW, he stood out to everybody. Whether it be Benjamin, Batista, and Cena was blown away by those people too. He could see Benjamin walk on the top rope with ease. He could see Batista and Brock do power moves with ease. He could see Orton turn everything that he was given and just make it look super easy because he's a second, third generation star, is a multi-generation star. He was another guy that really stood out at that point. But Cena, his charisma alone made him stand out as a superstar. And everyone, according to Randy Orton at that point, thought, who does this guy think he is? Coming in here and making himself out to be a big star, thinking that he's a bigger star than he actually is. But his charisma caught their eye. So Vince at that point, this was around kind of the same thing where they were talking about in the previous episode where Vince cut that promo on Raw when the NWO was like killed off and shit like that in storyline. And Vince wanted someone to step up. He wanted, someone to show ruthless aggression. And that's when Cena stepped up on that SmackDown a couple nights later. He was already wrestling at that point on live events and dark matches before WWE shows. They had no one else, so they turned to John Cena. So Cena said that his first conversation with Vince, I don't know if it was that night or like beforehand, I'm not sure. But his first conversation with Vince, he said, was that Vince, the first thing he told Cena to do, go cut your fucking hair. And I'm not saying that because I say fucking a lot. He actually told Cena, go cut your fucking hair. Because he had like the long, slick back hair at that point. Honestly, I thought it was a good look. I'm not going to lie to you. I think that's a good look for Cena, especially if he was supposed to be a heel later on. I like the slick back hair look. He never did that again. He had like the buzz cut from that point forward. So that was completely a creation of Vince McMahon. If it wasn't for Vince, Cena probably would have had that long hair for a while to come after that. But it was Vince's idea to cut his hair. I don't know why. Maybe he looked like a douche. I don't know. I like the look as a heel, but that's just me. So anyway, John Cena answered the open challenge that Kurt Angle laid out on SmackDown that night on June 27, 2002. Slapped him across the face. Captured everyone's attention right from the get-go. And through the showing that Cena had in that match, he earned Kurt Angle's respect. Angle did everything to try to blow him up that night, take him to his limit, really embarrass him. And he withstood the test of endurance and durability and everything. Cena really stood out, and he held his own against the WWE former, the multi-time WWE champion. And Bruce Pritchard even said Cena delivered his promo that night with heart, with passion. He knocked it out of the park. He took that opportunity and fucking ran with it. So not only did Cena earn Kurt Angle's respect, he also earned the respect of a lot of people backstage, including The Undertaker. So what you saw on TV with people lining up to shake Cena's hand, that was legitimate, including Taker. And it was so cool, it was so genuine, they wanted to replicate it for TV. So they did it over for that segment on TV where Taker came by, and he was the WWE champion at that point. He was the undisputed champion. He walked up to Cena, said, "Nice job, kid," shook his hand and walked off. That was genuine. That was real. So anyway, Angle knew even at that point that Cena was bound to be something special. But it also turned into a question of, now what? It's a lot like with the initial episode of the show where it's like, oh, we bought our competition. Where do we go from here? You have your biggest success. And I think a lot of people fear this just in general in life, where you have your biggest success and it turns into a question of, where do we go from here? What else can I accomplish that eclipses what I'm doing right now? How can I top myself? That's what the question turned to with John Cena. Cena, I guess, did this gimmick, which I did not know of. Well, first of all, I didn't really have a gimmick or a character. Drake Maverick pointed out he had no sense of a character at all. But what Cena did was he wore colors of the city that he was wrestling in. That was like basically his gimmick. I had no idea that he used to do that. I honestly did not know that until I heard about it here, which I guess is cute. It's kind of cute, or it's a stupid little thing, and people could not have given two shits, though. And then I say cute as in like, oh, that's a nice little gimmick, but no one could give two shits, So that's what he did with his tights to match the color of the city that he was in. It did not make people care about him anymore whatsoever. People just did not give a shit about the guy. The passion he had, the charisma he had was not enough, and as a result, he fell to the wayside. So it was at that point, I would say after his feud with Chris Jericho, because he had that mini feud with Jericho, that he was impressive. He beat Jericho a bunch of times, I think, including on pay-per-view. But it wasn't enough. He started to fall out of favor with not only the audience, but backstage officials and management as well. So within months, he was wrestling in Velocity. That's crazy. That's like if Honestly, I think Jericho can relate to that because he had this hot debut with The Rock and then he wrestled on fucking Heat for months. So Cena and Jericho have a lot of similarities in that sense. I mean, Jericho was never the big star that Cena ended up becoming, but, it's a very similar star path where you have this hot debut and you can't really capitalize off of it, so you just kind of flounder for a long time because Cena didn't really do anything to develop his character and make people care about him. So he started wrestling on Velocity, and people didn't know who he was. He didn't know who he was. Who was he supposed to be? So Cena was actually told around this point they would have like semi-annual cuts around November and at the end of May. Cena was told, listen, dude, you're going to get cut with the Christmas cuts. We're probably going to fire you at the end of December. It's just not working out. So at that point, he understood it. He wasn't like surprised, like, oh my God, I'm getting fired. Like he understood it. He got it because he felt like he failed. Not like he felt like he failed. But the thing is, though, with Cena, like the one nitpick I have of this episode, and specifically this portion of the episode, is that he never explains, unless I missed something, he never really explained how he failed. Like, was it his fault? Was it the company's fault? Was it both? Like, he never actually said, like, oh, I lost motivation, I was content. Like, I would understand that. Maybe he was. He just didn't really explicitly say that here. All they said was he had a hot debut, and that was it. Did the booking fail him? Like, did they fail to book him properly after that? And yeah, he had no character, but that's also part on the company. That's partly on the company because they didn't really give him a character to make people care about him. But that's also on Cena because he wasn't doing enough to stand out. So maybe it goes both ways, but I feel like they should have done a better job of explaining that. Anyway, so they were on a European tour right before he was supposed to get fired, maybe in like November or so. Not actually November, it was October because of what would happen afterward. He heard a bunch of stars, people like Rikishi, Rey Mysterio, freestyling in the back. So he thought he would join in. It resonated with Cena. It resonated with him because that's something he knows. That's something he can do. Just rhyme off the top of his head. Stephanie was in the front of the bus and she heard this and was like, wow, how did you remember all of that? And he's like, are you crazy? Like, that's just stuff I came up that's the stuff I came up with off the top of my head. Like, I can't remember things like that. Like, I can just rhyme with ease. That's just something I know. That's something I'm just really, really good at. So Stephanie's like, all right, rap about this tuna fish, because I guess she eats healthy a lot. So Cena started rapping about the tuna fish, the flight they were on, about Stephanie herself, and she was blown away and asked him, do you want to do this on TV? And he's like, absolutely. Please let me do this on TV. So he had his one opportunity to either make himself or break himself at the Halloween party on the Halloween episode of SmackDown, October 31st, 2002. So I thought originally, and maybe I misunderstood this, was that it was the rap that he did on this episode that really saved his career. And yeah, it was, but it wasn't like, oh my God, he did this rap. How we didn't know that he could do this. What happened was that he did the rap earlier than that. And again, maybe I'm just confusing myself here. Wasn't aware of the timeline. But Cena did the rap earlier than that, prior to that, on the European tour at the back of the bus with Rikishi and Mysterio, people like that. And he impressed Stephanie, so it was her idea for him to do it on TV. So it's not like randomly he did this rap on TV and we didn't really expect him to do this. That was always the plan. It was really more a matter of, is he going to make this opportunity his own, make the most of it, and knock it out of the park? Or is his rapping skills overblown? Or are they just not as good as Stephanie says they are? You know what I'm saying? But no, he actually fucking knocked it out of the park. It was a sink or swim moment. He swam, he flourished, and he knocked it out of the park. Miz, watching this as a fan, realized, hey, there's something there with John Cena. For the first time since he arrived in the main roster, he's got something. So he started to dress a certain way to grab people's attention. He had like the matching beanie with the shorts, the jerseys, the outlandish jackets. He tried to be as outlandish as possible to capture people's attention, and it worked. And this was the version of John Cena that really made fans feel something. And because he was allowed to be himself, people took to that. People started to care about him, and he really started to get over, and he started to reap the benefits in like late 2002, early 2003, and beyond. But just because the fans liked him didn't mean that everyone else in the back liked him. So this is something I did not know, which I guess makes sense looking back at it in retrospect, was that just because he was popular with the fans, he was not popular backstage. The writers liked him because he was getting himself over with this gimmick and whatnot, but people were not happy. People were not happy backstage with how popular he was becoming. Because, he never really did the same rap in each city. That was really what jump-started his career, really made him become a superstar. It was a happy accident of a gimmick, and he was allowed to be himself, and he was getting over. The talent did not like that. Their mindset was, Christian was on, interviewed on this episode as well. He said, why is he getting that chance to be himself and I'm not? And that's a very valid question. I'm very glad they incorporated that here because, yeah, Cena got a chance and he ran with it. A lot of people don't get that chance. People have that talent in them. They're just not allowed to showcase it. Cena was able to. A lot of other people don't get that same opportunity. So I could see where the jealousy stemmed from. Even Kurt Angle said. Kurt Angle was another guy. He was like, listen, I saw this dude taking my place. I saw him as my replacement because he was getting so good so fast. I was kind of jealous of that. I was afraid of that because I didn't want him to take my spot as the face of the SmackDown brand, But Cena even admitted, I didn't care about that. I don't give a crap what these people think about me because I knew their comments weren't genuine. It was merely a reflection of their own insecurities, which is 100% correct. I mean, if Cena sucked and they were saying this guy doesn't belong in this spot, that's one thing. But he didn't suck. Cena was good enough to be in that spot, So he is 100% right. That goes with anything. A lot of people will say, oh, yeah, but your haters, blah, blah, blah. I'm not saying every one of those people is wrong, or every one of those people are wrong. But there's a lot of those people that are merely jealous of you because they're, insecure about themselves, that they're not at the spot and not at the, that position on the totem pole that you are to be successful as you are. So he is absolutely right. A lot of the hate for a lot of different things. In most cases, like if you're doing something dumb, then you're absolutely open to criticism and hate and stuff like that because you probably shouldn't be doing it wrong. You're just not as good as you think you are or whatever. A lot of that, though, is merely a reflection of those people's own insecurities. So again, like I said, the writers loved that he was getting himself over. And that led us to WrestleMania 20. And the people in the back were not digging John Cena. A lot of people told Big Show, listen, don't put him over. This guy has no respect for the business. Cena heard those criticisms. Big Show didn't care. He said they were wrong. He wanted to work with John Cena. And as a result of that, they had a great match. Or not a great match, but a serviceable match at WrestleMania 20. John Cena really impressed them. Really impressed the Big Show. They had a great, a great moment, if nothing else, with Cena hoisting up the Big Show on his shoulders, delivering the attitude adjustment, or the FU at that point, as he called it, and won the United States Championship. Madison Square Garden went nuts with that finish. And Adam Cole, watching as a fan, really saw it as a turning point for John Cena. But the humble Cena, just to kind of put in perspective, which something I did not know, Cena left that night from the public parking lot, the 8th floor at Madison Square Garden. He left with all the fans as United States champion. I don't think they still do that anymore. I think even all the losers on the show, they kind of shuttle in together or have them drive into the private parking spot, whatever. I don't think any of the major wrestlers now, 15 years later, are parking with the fans. But that's still crazy. Like at WrestleMania, the same show he left as United States champion, reached the apex of his career at that point, the biggest moment in his entire career up to that point, and he was leaving in the public parking area. That's amazing. Like, could you imagine seeing, I don't know, who was U.S. champion last year? Samoa Joe just walking out to he parked right next to you, and you're going to have to be behind him. I would not want to piss him off, but could you imagine that? That's amazing to me. But anyway, so WrestleMania 20 was a really big show, because not only did it mark the beginning, not really the beginning of the beginning, but the beginning to an extent of the ascent of John Cena, it also marked the end for various people, for a number of different people, including Stone Cold Steve Austin. And yeah, he wrestled his final match at WrestleMania 19, but WrestleMania 20 was kind of sort of it for Stone Cold. He was around as the authority figure on Raw for most of 03. So yeah, he retired from the ring in 03 at WrestleMania 19, but he was still on the show for the better part of that year. And then he was at WrestleMania 20. He was involved in the build for that show, for the match with Brock and Goldberg. Goldberg took off, his contract expired. Brock Lesnar took off, his contract expired. They both left. The Rock was done after WrestleMania 20. He was already kind of a part-timer at that point anyway, but he was officially done after WrestleMania 20. He may have made 1 or 2 more appearances after that point, but Rock was gone for the most part up until he wrestled again in 2011, which is really, really crazy. So there was an opening there for John Cena to become the guy, and he did. So fast forward to 2005. JBL, his feud with John Cena over the WWE Championship. JBL loved the dynamic he had with John Cena. He was this hateable heel. People fucking hated JBL. John Cena, the lovable, rapping, the kind of the misfit in a way, and JBL was this professional, classy heel. You know, it was a great dynamic they had there. And Cena owes a lot to JBL for getting him over. Vince even asked JBL, what do you think of John Cena? And JBL told him, he's your guy. He is your guy. He is the guy to build around. So John Cena won the championship at WrestleMania 21. It was not a great match. I think a lot of people watching that match know it's not a great match. It's a great moment because John Cena wins his first WWE title that night, but it's not a great match, all right? I think Batista and Triple H, even that wasn't an instant classic, but I like that match a lot more than Cena and JBL. That was like a basic 10-minute TV main event. But the moment itself was really, really cool. And he talked about how, and I was glad they mentioned this, that Cena's U.S. championship run, not only the run itself, but the championship he designed for that run, the customized U.S. championship belt, it was a success merchandise-wise, selling-wise. So it was, I don't know if it was his idea, but they ran with it, the idea to do the same thing with the WWE title. He called the WWE title bland, and I can't say I agree with Cena here. I personally, and I know I'm not alone here, I like the Undisputed Championship look. I thought it was a really good look. I thought it was a cool-looking title. It wasn't like, oh, super badass or super traditional, whatever. I thought it was a cool-looking title, but it was Cena's idea, I think, because he called the original title bland, that design of it anyway, and they wanted to revamp it into something new. So that was what led to the spinner belt. And even Big Show is quoted in saying, he calls the WWE title spinner belt, it was 30-something pounds of garbage. And yeah, it sold a lot of merchandise, but it pissed off a lot of the older generation fans and a lot of like the male fans and people like that who didn't think it was cool. They thought it was trash. They turned a title into a toy. But Cena saw the shift there in the audience. They didn't have to go PG in order for him to realize that we're moving in a different direction now. Those older fans are disappearing. He sees a lot more kids. He doesn't have to crunch the numbers to figure this out. He saw a lot more kids starting to attend the shows. So it was actually his idea, and this I did not know. And again, he's probably said this elsewhere, but I did not know this. He actually told Vince, listen, I got to stop rapping. Probably the end of 05, early 06 maybe. He was still doing it during the feud with Jericho and Christian in the mid 2005. So maybe later on that year, if not early 06, he told Vince, I got to stop rapping because more kids are coming to our shows and it's not appropriate. They weren't PG, not for another few years, but he just didn't really think, he thought it didn't really mesh well with the character he was doing at that point, and he didn't want to offend parents and kids were going, so I get it. But that's why he stopped doing it. It wasn't a Vince call. It wasn't a WWE call. It was his call to stop doing that and really phase out the Doctor of Thugonomics character. And now it became cool at this point for fans to boo John Cena. And they were entering new territory because they were building around a guy that fans did not universally love. The Rock, yeah, he had that reaction early on in his career. When he became the guy, though, he was universally loved. Hulk Hogan, for the most part, up until maybe the final year or two that he was in the company, was universally loved. Stone Cold Steve Austin, universally loved. Bob Backlund, Bruno Sammartino, you name them, they were universally loved. John Cena was getting this weird dynamic now where like half of the audience hated him, specifically the older male fans, and the younger kids and the girls absolutely adored him and loved him. But it was that dynamic that assured that he would be on top for years to come. Because those male fans, as much as they hate John Cena, they care about the character. They want to pay to see him get his ass kicked. And those kids and girls love him, so they're not going anywhere. So it worked. The dynamic fucking worked. So either way, love him or hate him, fans felt strongly about him. So that was their mindset. That's why they never really needed to turn him, because he was getting a reaction, one way or the other. It would be one thing if it was like, okay, people don't care about him anymore. And I'm glad they don't adopt that same mindset for everybody. Because, yeah, people were booing Rollins before he went heel. That wasn't a case like, oh, just make the most of it like we are for Roman Reigns. Like, no, you got to move in a different direction. With Cena's character, I get it. You don't want to turn him heel for X, Y, and Z. Rollins is not John Cena. You can get away with turning him heel. Roman, they should have turned heel years ago, but that's a whole other story. Anyway, so that's when we get into his WrestleMania 22 program with Triple H. JBL was a different opponent for him because he was like a very traditional heel. People hated JBL. People did not hate Triple H at this point. He was a cool wrestler. So it was hard to boo him. Cena actually got booed out of the building of the 2006 Hall of Fame ceremony the night before WrestleMania 2006 22. And I think they were at the Allstate Arena, maybe. Because I think that WrestleMania was at the Allstate Arena because they were in Chicago. I mean, it's fucking Rosemont, but you know what I mean. He got booed out of the building at that '06 Hall of Fame. That was probably the turning point for Cena, because, yeah, he was getting booed before that, like when he lost the championship to Edge months earlier, which they do not mention. That's not really central to his ascent, so I can get why they kind of glossed over it. But that was really, I guess, for Cena when he realized, holy shit, they're booing the fuck out of me. And Vince told him right before he went out, just go out there and smile. And he had that shit-eating grin on. He had that shit-eating grin on his face. I always fucking botch it. Shit-eating grin on his face. And Cena addressed the heat that he was getting. He addressed the boos, but he also made it clear, I'm not going to waver. And that lesson that he was taught that night by Vince McMahon stuck with him forever. And that was something he still does. That's still something that kind of sticks with him to this day. I mean, he's not booed as heavily now as he was back then, because he's not really around as much. But still, I mean, I think with Cena, though, he took that lesson and he ran with it. And the biggest takeaway for him from WrestleMania 22 was to trust Vince McMahon. He understood what he was talking about. And it was his win over Triple H that night that really cemented him as a A-list level superstar in WWE. So he had the reins now to run WWE. He just had to run with it. He had the ball. Now he had to run with it. He was the guy. Don't fucking let us down. So Cena, what really stood out to officials and fans and Brian Gewirtz and Vince and people like that was that he worked a full schedule. He did all the media appearances, but he never gave off that he was tired. Never gave off that he was unhappy, that he was frustrated, that he was burned out. He no-sold everything. Not just in the ring, but largely as a performer outside of the ring. And that he would take up all these media appearances, and he would never give off the impression that he was sick of it. In fact, he gave off the impression that he wanted more. He made the most of everything he was a part of. He made every minute of his main event superstardom count. And that was what really made him John Cena. And he did everything he could to be better, to make the company better. He was the ultimate company guy. And it was the business that Cena drew while on top, according to Brian Gewirtz. This is his idea here. This is his mindset. It was the business that John Cena drew during his time on top that allowed WWE to book a stadium like Ford Field in Detroit, Michigan for WrestleMania 23. And you got to remember, I know WWE had done bigger arenas prior to this point, but, like years earlier, like in the 80s. Prior to this point, though, they weren't doing this type of big arenas. They just weren't. 19, I'm not sure how many people that filled in Seiko Field or whatever it was. 18, they were on the Astrodome. That probably fit a lot of people. But, the years preceding WrestleMania 23, they were at MSG for WrestleMania 20. That fits, 20,000 people? Maybe. WrestleMania 21, Staples Center. Maybe 15, 20,000 people? Maybe. They would never do a stadium like that again. Not a stadium, but like an arena like that again for WrestleMania. It's all about the big stadiums now because they know they can fill it. And WrestleMania 23 was really what kicked it off. Because 22 they were at, I think they were at the Staples, not the Staples Center, but Allstate Arena in Chicago. Again, if it's 10, 15,000 people, maybe. But it was WrestleMania 23 that really kicked off this streak of them booking bigger stadiums. Places like Ford Field, places like the Bowl in Orlando for WrestleMania 24, 25. They booked that stadium in Dallas, I think. I forgot what it was called, but was it the Astrodome? I don't remember. I don't think so. 26, they were in Phoenix in that massive stadium. 2011, they were in Georgia. I forgot the name of the stadium, but they've booked stadiums every year from that point forward, and a lot of that had to do with John Cena and the business that he was doing at that point. On top, he was the guy to build around. So anyway, the big mistake, or rather the big takeaway, coming out of this, he beat Shawn Michaels at that event, really again solidified him as a main event superstar. This is where we end here. The big takeaway from Cena, they also replay the comments that he made at the beginning of the show with him. He feels that his time as the face, or rather as not the faith, but the face rather, as the of the Ruthless Aggression era, it was a failure. It did not work. Early on, he was an absolute failure as the face of that era in WWE. He was really what kicked it off in that match with Kurt Angle. He said the words Ruthless Aggression in that promo before the match, and he fucking failed because he floundered. And yeah, he's successful now, but the immediate aftermath, he failed to capitalize off the momentum he had in that moment. And it was only because of one little rap that he did on a bus one time that saved his entire career. If it wasn't for that rap in the back of the bus with the rest of the boys, and Stephanie, had she not heard that, then he would be fucking, I don't know if he would have gone to TNA or hung it up in his career or what. But WWE would have never been the same. So he said that he was not going to let the same mistakes that he made at the beginning of the Ruthless Aggression era happen again. And that's why he became the superstar that he did. He said he had to earn every fucking inch. And again, they blur out the fucking part, but he said he had to earn everything that he got in WWE. He stepped up at a time in WWE where they needed a crossover superstar. There was a need for that crossover superstar, and he became that guy. He had the size, he had the look, he had the charisma, he had the talent, he was unique. WWE needed John Cena in order for them to grow, and John Cena needed WWE for himself to grow, and it worked out beautifully. That partnership worked for years and years and years. And I think John Cena, I'm going to say this safely right now, I think is the last truly big star that WWE ever created. Yeah, you can argue Roman and Rollins, and they're up there. I don't think anyone else in the last 15 years has come close to matching the superstar level that John Cena has. I mean, if you ask anyone, they know who John Cena is. Almost everybody knows who John Cena is. Rollins, Roman, probably not. 9 out of 10 people will tell you, I don't know who those people are. Unless they watch wrestling, of course. But for casual viewers, people who don't watch wrestling at all, everyone knows who John Cena is. My fucking grandmother knows who John Cena is. Does she know who Roman Reigns is or Seth Rollins? Absolutely not. So Cena, to me, they didn't really say this here because it would, expose their weaknesses as a company in booking these talents. But Cena was the last truly huge star that they created. Because anytime he comes back, no matter how, this is the first time that we've gone 8 months without John Cena. That's a long time. 6, 7 months. That's the longest he's ever been gone from WWE. And he's not even hurt, He hasn't wrestled a match in well over a year. He probably will at WrestleMania this year, I would hope. Hopefully not against Elias. I think the Elias-Cena match that's been rumored is a complete joke. But anyway, that's a whole other discussion for another time. I'll talk more about that on Wrestle Rant Radio on Thursday. They need to do a better job of creating more stars. Not that that's the biggest takeaway from this thing. And the big takeaway is that Cena earned everything he got. He made himself into a star with the whole rapping thing. That's what saved his career. They cover his whole ascent and the backlash from the fans, people backstage, doubting himself. There was a lot of great stuff here. I thought this was an awesome episode of the show. It clocks in at around 50 minutes. So it's on the longer side, but it's well worth it. The show is already off to a strong start. If you haven't checked out the first episode, definitely do so. Check out this episode. But yeah, I think the bottom line is WWE's got to do a better job of creating stars. Because you watch this series, you watch the Monday Night Wars series, and you think to yourself, why don't they have as big stars today as they did back then, It's jarring to watch this stuff and think to yourself, holy shit, they don't have that type of star power anymore. But anyway, I thought this was great. Be sure to check it out right now on the WWE Network. WWE Ruthless Aggression Episode 2. Enter John Cena. Great stuff here. So anyway, be sure to check out my original review of Episode 1 from yesterday. I will be back next Tuesday with my review of Episode 3, because next Monday I'm breaking down Broken Skull Sessions with Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Big Show. And there might be something else going up on the network in the next couple of days. I know my Ms. and Mrs. review will be going up on Friday here on Network and Chill. Saturday, my SmackDown review. Tomorrow, #AskGSM. Thursday, Wrestle Rant Radio excerpts. Sunday, it depends what time the Broken Skull Sessions episode airs. If it airs early enough, I might watch it, review it that day. I doubt it, though. It'll probably go up on Monday. And then the Episode 3 review will probably go up next Tuesday. I know there's a new Chronicle going up at some point, a day of in a couple weeks, I would assume. The day of that just went up, I got to offer a correction on this. There was a new day of that went up on Friday on Valentine's Day. I reviewed it here on the channel, and I thought it was awesome, and I said as much in the review. But I got word, though, and I'm about to watch it back today, that they re-uploaded it because the audio issues that kind of plagued it the first time that I watched it are gone. So I just wanted to offer an update on that. Be sure to check out the day of on the Royal Rumble. Great stuff, especially now that the audio issues are gone. Check out this show, Ms. and Mrs., everything else on the channel and on the WWE Network. So yeah, we'll be back tomorrow, a new #AskGSM, and we'll be back here on Network and Chill on Friday with my review of the latest episode of Ms. and Mrs. So until then, guys, have a great rest of your week. I'm Graham G. Matthews, and I'll catch your ass down the road.